this is Matt with the Fitness Channel. Not going to lie, I'm proud of this presentation. Some of the animations are absolutely on point. This presentation is all about the nervous system. So on my map for the nervous system, we're going to start off and we're going to figure out why on earth we have this nervous system in the first place. What are the functions of the nervous system, or what does it do? Then what we're going to do is dive into the structure of the nervous system. So we'll figure out the two main sections and then subdivisions of the nervous system. We'll go a little bit more into the structure of a motor neuron. So we'll figure out what all the different parts of a motor neuron are. And then the last thing we're going to cover is going to be motor units and a fabulous law called the all or none law. So let's start straight off and discuss the functions of the nervous system. Now, to think about it to begin with, your body has basically got within inside of it kind of a table for every reading and everything that it has. So temperature, pressure, chemical levels, stretch of a muscle, tension of a muscle, vibrations that are going through a muscle. And what basically happens is your body's aim is to keep it within this little box here. So take temperature, for example. If your temperature goes above here, the central nervous system will notice that, it will respond, and it will do something to bring it back down. If it goes down here, it goes past this point here, it will notice it, it doesn't like that, it will do something, and all it wants to do is keep everything in that zone right in the middle. Now that little zone in the middle is something we refer to as homeostasis. So homeostasis, or same state, is the aim of homeostasis. There we go. So homeostasis is that same state. It's where all of the different levels want to be kept in between. Now, the way that your nervous system functions is it has a group of sensory neurons. So I've picked a thermometer here. Other temperature reading devices are available online. So a thermometer is measuring temperature. It's a sensor. All it's going to do is figure out something that's going on, and it's going to send information back. So part of the nervous system is to sense. So we have sensory neurons for that. And what they do is they're sending information to the computer. Now this is exactly what I look like sat at my computer now with my lovely hairdo and my firm blue tie. This is the computer. This is your brain, basically. This is your brain and your spinal cord. And what happens in the brain and the spinal cord is information is interpreted. So the second function is to interpret the information. So it's deciding whether the information here is too high, too low, is it in homeostasis. Now if it is in homeostasis, then ain't nothing needs to happen. All that's going to happen is computer's going to go, yeah, happy with that, no response is required. But let's say, for example, you're sat in a room and the temperature starts dropping and dropping and dropping. As this temperature gauge goes down and down and down, what's going to start to happen is the computer will then understand that that isn't where we want it to be, and it will respond. So what then happens is he'll pick up his phone, which he doesn't actually have in this picture, so let's imagine he does. He's going to pick up his phone, or he's going to send an email, and he's going to respond. And what's then going to happen is he's going to send a message to the muscles to contract. So you'll start shivering away, shaking like this, and that is the response. So what that happens, that is called the motor side of things. That happens through motor neurons. So the three main functions of the nervous system are to sense information, to interpret that information, and then to respond if needed. And here's how your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system are structured. So the whole nervous system is split up into two parts. As you can see here, we've got our CNS, which is the central nervous system, and that quite simply is the brain and the spinal cord. they form the central nervous system. Of course, they're in the centre. That's easy to remember. You don't actually need to understand ganglions or anything like that at this stage. So the central nervous system is a little bit in the middle. Coming out of that, you then have on the periphery the peripheral nervous system as it comes out. So there's actually 31. Let's get a different colour there. So there's actually 31 pairs of nerves which come out from the central nervous system and branch out all over the body. And that is your peripheral nervous system. Now your peripheral nervous system is split into two different sections. So if we take the PNS here, which is the peripheral nervous system, part of that nervous system you can control consciously. So if I was to ask you to lift up an arm, to shake your head, to smile, lift a leg up, that is controlled by you. Your brain can tell those muscles what to do. That's called your somatic branch. So that is the somatic branch of the peripheral nervous system. Now, if I was to ask you to digest your food a little bit faster, or if I was to ask you to churn your stomach a little bit faster, you couldn't do it. It is unconsciously controlled. Now, that's automatically happening, and that happens through the autonomic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system is further divided into two parts. It's going to be important to remember these. So one of them automatically speeds things up. So it automatically speeds things up. It's called the sympathetic nervous system. Automatically speeds things up. So as soon as you start exercising, your heart rate will increase, your breathing rate will go up. All this activity will increase automatically, and that's done through the sympathetic. I tried to write it fast so you could understand. Sympathetic nervous system. Now when you stop exercising, automatically what's going to start to happen is your heart rate will go down. We call it the rest and digest branch, and it is the parasympathetic. So it takes a little bit longer to write. Run out of space, but there we go. So it's the parasympathetic. Now if you imagine you jumped out of a plane and you released your parachute, it would slow you down, one would hope. So the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system slows you down. So here is a picture of a motor neuron. And there's four main things that you're going to need to understand in a motor neuron. As with all cells in the body, you're going to find a cell body. And inside that cell body, you'll probably find a little nucleus in there, which is going to have all kind of DNA and stuff like that. So the cell body is the little part in the middle that you're going to find. Now, running down the center of this whole thing, a lot like in a kind of plug and a cord, outside the cord you've got kind of a rubbery structure. Inside it you've got your copper wires. So the wire that runs through this thing is called the axon. So the axon is the wire. So the wire runs right the way down the middle, and that is the axon. Now surrounding that wire is something called your myelin sheath. Now the myelin sheath is a fatty coating to the axon, and what it does is it provides a little bit of protection. Most importantly, it insulates that wire. So if I was to, for example, take the plug which is controlling, I don't know, your telly, and I was to cut all of the coating away from it, the nerve signals wouldn't be as able to move through as quickly and as efficiently. So your myelin sheath allows nice free moving nerve impulses, and it covers and coats the axon. The last thing is your dendrites, and these are the tree-like extensions which come out of the motor neuron at the end, and their job is to kind of seek and pass on other information. So you've got your dendrites, which are the tree-like extensions at the end, There are other things involved in a motor neuron, but at this stage for level 2 they'll be the key parts of it which are going to pop up in an exam. Now, with motor units, try and remember this definition. A motor unit is a motor neuron and all of the fibers that it innervates. And here's what that's going to look like. Within your body, if you imagine these red lines are your muscle fibers, you will have a motor neuron, and that motor neuron is going to attach onto a number of fibers. Not all of them, just some of them. Another motor neuron will attach to other fibers, and another motor neuron will attach to other fibers. That motor neuron, which has been enclosed in a square, and those fibers that it innervates are what we define as a motor unit. Now, an important point to understand about motor units is something called the all or none law. So pulled straight off of Wikipedia, the all or none law essentially means that when a signal goes to that motor unit, the fibers will fire fully or they won't fire at all. So you've got the official definition there. The key thing to understand is that those fibers will fire fully or they will not fire at all. Now, the easiest way to understand the all or none law and how motor units work is to try and take this example that I've done here. This is what I'm proud of because this took me ages to do and it is all aligned, which suits me down to the ground. Now, what we've got here is a load of light bulbs and they are all off. If you think about the light bulbs in your home, and I don't mean the ones attached to a posh dimmer switch, I mean ones that are attached to a switch. The switch is either on or the switch is off. Now let's imagine that one of these switches, this one here, is attached to these lights here. So when that switch is switched on, these lights either turn on fully or they don't turn on at all. That's how the all or none law works. Now, if you imagine that every single one of these lights here are all of the muscle fibers within one of your muscle groups or one of your individual muscles, these switches are the motor neuron and they are innervating these lights. Now, the way it works is if your body wants a little bit of a contraction, it doesn't want a great big contraction, it's not lifting maximal weight, it'll only switch on a couple of motor units. What we're looking at here is the motor unit. That motor neuron and those lights are a motor unit. Now, if I only needed a little bit of light, I'm only going to switch one motor unit on. If I only needed a little small contraction because I was picking a pen up, I'd just switch 1, 2, 3, just a couple of motor units on. Now, in your muscles, you might have hundreds, you might even have thousands of motor units, depending on the muscle. I'm just working with 4 here because I would have lost my mind if I tried to repeat this. Now, let's say, for example, we want a little bit more contraction. We switch another switch on. More lights turn on. This is a whole other motor unit. So let's get this one in blue. So for this motor unit, these fibers are innervated. You get the idea. So we don't need a massive contraction. We need a little bit more than the other one. So we've turned 2 motor units on. This blue one is a motor unit with all of those lights. This red one is a motor unit with all of its lights. If we need more of a contraction, we switch more on. So we then turn on this motor unit and all etc, all of the lights that it innervates. Now, if we're trying to do a maximum lift and we're trying to lift as much weight as we can do, we will switch on as many motor units as we can. But be aware, as the human body, it will probably always keep a couple of lights spare, just because a maximum 100% of motor unit contraction is going to be a little bit too much and probably a bit dangerous for some of the structures. So it'll probably keep a couple switched off just as a safety mechanism. So what we're looking at here is how that all or none law works and how motor units work in the body. You're welcome. So let's go back to that mind map. So we have just gone through our nervous system. We figured out what the functions were. So we had the sensory part, the interpretive part, and then the motor side of things. So the sensory, the interpretive, and the motor side of things. Then we went through the structure of a nervous system. So we had our central nervous system and we had our peripheral nervous system, which is branched off into your somatic and your autonomic. And the autonomic is got the one that speeds things up, called the sympathetic, and the one that slows things down, called the parasympathetic. We figured out that we've got some motor neurons and that they've got little cell bodies, that they've got a wire called an axon. We figured out that we have a myelin sheath which surrounds it, and these tree-like extensions here are called your dendrites. And then the last thing that we've gone through are your motor units, and a motor unit is the motor neuron and the fibers that it innervates. And then we figured out the all or none law. I do hope that's been useful to you, and I look forward to seeing you on another video.